We're here today with Carly Geraci. She's from Michigan. She recently completed the Appalachian Trail in 2019. Is it actually pronounced Appalachian or is it Appalachian?
It just depends on where you're from.
Yeah, that's what I thought
Where
too.
you're from. Half of the people will tell you it's Appalachian, and then other people will be like it's Appalachian. So it's really just like that, north or south people saying it.
Yeah.
I say Appalachian, but there were plenty of people who corrected me on the trail. So
All right. So I wanted to start and see if you could tell me just a little bit about where your journey in photography begins.
my journey in photography started at the student newspaper at Michigan State News. I kind of was just I always read the paper, in between classes or in class if it was really boring, and I remember like looking at the classifieds and seeing that they were hiring for a photographer, and I kind of had photography as a hobby before that, but it was really just me taking pictures of like my friends and stuff. But it wasn't until I got a job at the student newspaper that I like found photography and wanted to like pursue that more seriously, in photojournalism, which like I didn't really know even existed until, I was like, I just assumed that like the journalist maybe took photos, that there wasn't like a whole like separate person dedicated just for photography. So once I discovered that, I was like, wow, that's really cool. It's a lot of fun. But so after, being like a junior, finding like, oh, like photojournalism is a thing, like that sounds like something I want to do. I kind of just pursued internships and workshops and connecting and trying to see if that was, something I wanted to do. And it was really cool. It didn't feel like a job at all. I mean, you know how it is. Just
Yeah.
like, well, to meet people and talk to people about their life it's fun and rewarding. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. I could go on and on about it into detail, but I feel like generally it was just like something I kind of stumbled upon,
Mm-hmm.
and it just really like clicked with like I'm like a very visual person, visual learner, and just like I really like talking to people. So um, it was very appealing to me at the time for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was appealing to me too. I kind of got into it a little bit of a different way, thinking that I kind of wanted to go into a sort of activism, but then realized that I totally didn't.
Yeah,
And that I
yeah.
really wanted to take photographs of people and like be able to be with these people during these special moments of their life and have that trust to be able to make their
Hmm.
picture. And it is something very rewarding, and it's nice to talk to another young female photographer and see how they got started. I've always, ever since we met, I really liked your work and
Thank you.
was always checking in on it to see like what you were doing and how you were doing it. I know you had a couple internships there. You were at like the Dallas Morning News for a while. How
Yep.
did that go?
It was incredible. I mean, it's hard to like have a favorite internship, but it was just I had never worked at a paper that big, and um, the kinds of assignments I was given on a daily basis literally made me feel like I was in a movie. Like I would be like, shooting some like very calm like community type meeting in the morning, and then just get called for some like crazy breaking news assignment on the other side of town. And I don't know, there's just something special about like, especially looking back on it now, there was something really special to be like going from like one place to another in one day, and just having, not knowing what's going to happen. um, and it seemed like that happened like every single day at the morning news. Like I had other internships that were maybe like, you have your assignments, and it's pretty much that's just it was those assignments. There wasn't going to be any like breaking news or anything most likely, but the Dallas Morning News was incredible. Just also being at a paper with like 200 journalists, thing was really, really inspiring. Um, and the city of Dallas is has a lot going on,
Yeah, I'd
so
say.
it's it. So I mean, I really like that, and I learned a lot from that internship. But it also did like definitely show me like what being a photojournalist would actually be like, especially like, because in my head I was like, a paper like the Dallas Morning News, like that's a place I could see myself wanting to work. So it did show me kind of like what my life could look like if I wanted to, like, pursue this lifestyle and this career. So that was important for me to see, I think.
I mean, do you find yourself wanting to pursue that now?
No, not really at all. Like, I think, and that's kind of what played into the trail. Like, there were some things that happened. Like, I tragically lost my aunt towards the end of that internship, and just like losing someone so close to you so tragically, and then it just kind of puts things in perspective. And I was just struggling with what to do next, because as much as I I liked what I saw at the Dallas Morning News, I didn't know like if it was like what was best for me, but so before the trail I kind of had second thoughts, I guess, second guesses about pursuing journalism, especially nowadays with everything going on, and just the reality of like, you know this is the reality of everything. And honestly, I don't think I had enough heart for it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't ready for it. And that's kind of when I stepped away. I stepped back and took the time to like think about what is photography for me. And I love photography. I mean, I love journalism and I love talking to people, but I don't think like being in newspaper photography is the kind of is what I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think I would be. So thankfully I was able to, that internship, as great as it was. And like, I mean, I worked, I did the best I could, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It just, I think it showed me like that this isn't necessarily what I want, at least right now, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that I had that, because if I never worked at a paper that big, you would never really know what it was like, or, so it's always good to have those experiences, even though I never thought I'd be saying that, I never thought I'd be like openly like just not wanting to pursue something I loved so much at one point,
Yeah. But I also think that, I mean, those experiences are critical when it comes to trying to determine like where you want to take your life. And mentioning the Appalachian Trail, I mean, it was this, transition period for you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you care to go into a little bit of detail about what that taught you about your connection with photography from there?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole transitional hike and period in time in my life, it was like a lot of like just like, introspective thinking. And I think the big takeaway from it was like, life is really short and you should really honestly only do what makes you happy, in general and on the day to day. And thinking about that in terms of like the relationship I had with photography, it was like thinking about like why I was taking the photos. Like obviously I was taking the photos because I was an intern. I was working for a newspaper. Like that's just what I do. But I didn't like feel as like passionate about it or as like driven to do some of the things that I was required to do. And I don't know, it was like did not feel right anymore. So like being able to like look back on why I was feeling that way, like when I was working as
That's okay.
So like I said, kind of repeating myself here is like thinking back to like that transitional period and like what it meant for my photography and the way I was feeling like towards the end of my internships and working for a newspaper. It was like it didn't feel like I was like fully there with my like I would feel fully connected to what I was doing. And at that point I just felt like I was like clicking a button. Mm-hmm. And there was no, I'm not saying that every single photo you take has to have a meaning behind it, but like if I'm not feeling like connected to what I'm doing like authentically, then it doesn't feel right anymore. But so I was with all that time to think on the trail, thinking back to like what do I want to be doing in my day-to-day life, and breaking it down to like very simple terms, like, all right, I'm not going to spend time doing things that for the most part don't make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's
So,
like, yeah.
did you notice pretty instantly like a difference in feeling for you when you began making photos out on the trail itself?
Yeah, but it wasn't right away. It was
Mm-hmm.
like it wasn't like okay, I'm not no one's paying me anymore, so I can do whatever I want. Like I still felt that, like, I mean, you know how like photojournalism is, like you kind of have to always be ready for the photo. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I always feel like I'm like I'll just be sitting there, like I'll, like, for example, sitting like around a fire with a bunch of hikers, and there's just some really, like, the sun is setting, like the light is getting like blue, and there's this huge roaring fire, like so many hikers sitting around like the campfire. I'm like, oh, this is like such a perfect photo. And like what is different is, the photojournalist to me would be like, let me get up, work this, like work this shoot, work this setting, and try to get, the best photo I can get. But what I noticed on the trail, like almost right away, was that that's not necessarily what I want to do, because there's a moment there that I, as just like someone hiking the trail, don't necessarily want to like interrupt. Which like technology and like hiking, especially like through hiking, it's like they don't really go well together. Like you don't necessarily see people like glued to their phones like you would maybe like at a bar or out in like society. Like most, like you might have service, you might not, and like usually people just aren't like too worried about their phones. So it's like whipping out like a giant camera around the fire. It's like kind of like people are always like, oh, what is that? And there was a lot of times when people would be like, oh, who are you working for? Like some people just don't want to be photographed, like more so not than like your typical person that you might run into, like, in public, that doesn't want their photo taken. Like it felt a little different because not only was I photographing these people, but like I was hiking with them. So it was like I didn't want to like cross any boundaries or disrespect anybody or make someone feel like uncomfortable. But I did notice that like when I was able to be out there taking photos by myself, I found myself drawn to like details that like would probably be overlooked by a photo editor, I think. So like just as simple details in nature, like moss on a rock, or like colorful leaves contrasted with snow, or like just like little nature patterns that reoccur are are pretty cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, how long did it take you to hike the whole thing through?
So I started February 28th and finished October 20th. So it was about 8 months total. I did take a few side trips to like DC and like in New Hampshire to like visit some friends. Um, but overall, like my whole like philosophy for the whole hike was just like stop and like smell the roses kind of thing, stop and pet the moss, because I knew that that was my time to hike, and I was like, okay, this could be the only time in my life where I can do this, so I'm not going to rush it or skip this waterfall or this chill campsite because I didn't make enough miles today. Um, which kind of got me into trouble towards the end, I guess, because I did take quite a while, and when I got to Maine, it was starting to get pretty cold again. Um, but I truly was able to like enjoy myself and not worry too much about the miles. Where there's other hikers, like there's other people who want to put in like 25 miles every day, and like that just hurts my soul and my knees.
So, I mean, do you care to share some of maybe like, I know it would be hard to take that time and condense it down to specific moments, but if you did have a couple of moments that really shine through for you, could you share those?
Yeah, I think a lot of like the moments like when you like look back on a journey of that magnitude, the moments that stick out for me are the moments of suffering and hardship. Um, like for example, in Maine, like I got to Maine and it was like middle of September, and what up there it can get cold. It can snow in September. And there was this one night where I had a hole in the bottom of my tent, and I only patched up one side of it, which it's usually not that big a deal, like honestly. But what happened was I set up my tent on a really flat spot next to a river, and there was like a flash flood that night, and my entire tent flooded, and all my sleeping bag, my puppy, all the gear that was supposed to keep me safe and warm on the trail was wet and like completely useless. And like I said, it was either the end of September, early October in Maine, and I think the temperature got down to like 41 that night, which like if it had been any colder, like would have definitely got hypothermia. But the whole night I was like, there's nothing I could do. Like all my stuff was wet, I was wet, and I like you couldn't really hike out because the road was so far away. So I just like sat there the whole night on my sleeping pad, like curled up in the fetal position, waiting for the sun to rise so I could keep hiking. And that was a pretty awful night. I made it over 2,000 miles, and at that point I wanted to quit, and I was so close to the end. But it was such a miserable night and a miserable time that that moment really sticks out for sure. And then there was like, there was some times in the beginning where like I questioned why I was out there, or like if it was what I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird just to like go from like being busy and having a job and doing these things, and then just having your only job being walking. So there were times when like, especially like I would at night check like Instagram and Facebook, and everyone's just like living their life, and I'm just walking in the woods all day. So questioning my own decision to do what I was doing kind of was a little like uncertain at first, but I think as I hiked along, I like kind of grew some confidence in myself. Like, all right, this is what I want to be doing. Like, there's a reason that I'm out here and I wanted to do this, so let's do it. But there was like this like random time when I was like I'm like kind of a slow hiker, I guess you could say. Like I feel like I'm always like the last one to camp, or the last one to lunch or something. And part of that could be because I stop and take photos a lot, but I also am just like, I have a very steady pace. And I do remember this one time I was like kind of behind the group I was hiking with, and kind of upset about it because I was like, man, I'm just so tired and everyone's so far away ahead of me. Like, what am I doing? And there was just like, I like broke out and like wept on this stump looking out over the valley, and like an uncontrollable cry where like if someone saw me doing it, like they probably would think I'm like hurt or don't know what I'm doing. So that was the time at the beginning where I just like I didn't know what to do. I was like, I couldn't stop crying, so I just walked and cried until I stopped, and kind of felt like a little kid at that point. But I don't know, there was like a lot of times where just like, random thoughts, especially like thoughts from childhood, would just like pop up in my head and be like, oh wow, I have not thought about this, in how many years, and here I am thinking about it over the course of a few months, like excessively. Mm-hmm. So I can't even remember what your initial question was, but
no, you answered it. You're good. I was asking you about like moments that stuck out to you.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
Like within the moments and the overall experience, do you find that you pull inspiration from that now that you're on the other side of it, and I assume you still make photos and work with photography. So do you find yourself pulling from that any?
Yes. Yeah. Like right now, I'm trying to like put together like a photo book from like all my stuff from the trail. And like so right now I'm like trying to like put into words like all the photos I took, and like kind of like connecting like what I saw to like how I felt, throughout the whole thing. So right now there's kind of just, it's been kind of, I'm trying to figure out, because like I have like there's all these beautiful moments that I saw and things, but I'm trying to put that into context like with what's going on right now with everything, and with like who I am has been kind of like my biggest project right now. And I would say that in terms of photography, I find myself really only taking photos when when I go out and hike or ride my bike or get outside. Like I haven't really, since I work at REI, like a retail store, there's really, my job isn't to take photos anymore. So I have to really take it upon myself to get out there and take photos. I find myself going straight for, the trails around in here in Michigan or something for inspiration. And like, I do feel way more comfortable taking photos like in the woods versus like out in public, which, before the trail, I probably would say the opposite. Like, being out in public around a bunch of people is like my jam. Like I will, work what I can, but I feel a lot more comfortable in the woods now.
Awesome.
That involves taking photos for sure, because I feel like I can just like see so much more now that I've hiked, so far.
Mm-hmm. See more on the other trails themselves.
Yeah, and like just like spending like 8 months like hiking through the woods, like I see like there's just seeing like the similarities in like the ecosystems on the trail, like from trail to trail, like seeing like what makes the trail like very similar to everything else and connected to everything else. And also I just find myself like I didn't do much hiking before the trailer. I wasn't like super outdoorsy, so it was like it kind of was like exploring like a new world, I guess you could say, in a cliche way, because everything was so new to me. And like hikers, like photographing hikers, like figuring out how to do that like in a non-invasive way, because like I do want to respect people's like time out in the middle of the woods when they're trying to like find peace or peace and quiet. Mm-hmm. It's still kind of a hard thing to figure out the best way to do it, because like if I see someone in the middle of the woods or like at a summit, it's like if the light's right, then I really have no problem taking a bunch of photos, but it's like in a way kind of does interrupt that wilderness experience.
So talking a little bit about this book that you're putting together, is it something that you think you'll actually like plan on printing, or is it something that you're keeping kind of virtual for now? Or
no, I'm definitely printing it. Have all the money I've been saving up for it, and basically it's pretty much done except for the introduction I have to write. So I think it'll probably be around like 60 pages, and it's basically just kind of like a visual representation of my journey on the trail, which has been, so since I am doing some photography now. Like I was doing a lot of like just like portraiture for like kids and stuff like that. So since I haven't really been taking photos as much as I'd like to, I've been kind of using like editing my book as like my creative outlet, which basically looks just like me sitting at my computer staring at the same thousands and thousands of photos like a bunch of times over. I've been looking at every single photo I took, like constantly analyzing, like, was this important? Does this represent my journey? And living vicariously through my photos right now has been my kind of like coping mechanism, getting back here to trail from the trail, because I think that's probably like one of the things that draws me to photography, is kind of like you are capturing a moment in time. And like as much as it sucked to carry 6 pounds of camera gear with me all the time, like I am so happy I did it, because now I feel like I was able to like capture some memories that like I just could not have captured on a cell phone, or I just would not have been able to do the same way if I didn't have my camera gear. So I do kind of feel like I have a little time capsule to look back on all the time now, which makes me happy, because I've met a lot of special people and I got to see a lot of cool things, and it's really hard to describe. So that's why photos are great.
So when you're going through all these pictures and you're looking for the one and you're asking yourself, like, was this moment important? Would you care to tell me a little bit about the determining factors that makes you say, yes, like, this moment was important?
I think, like, if I go through photos and, like, it brings back that feeling that I had when I took it, then, like, that's usually, like, a flag. Like, okay, that could be something, because, like, there's a reason why I took out my camera to take that photo. Like, clearly I felt something. I felt, you know, inspired by the light, or, you know, just really just thought something looked really cool. And if I have a feeling that brings me back when I look at a photo, usually that's, like, a good indicator that this could be something more. And then, like, hearing people's reactions to certain photos, like, there are certain photos that I feel like are just obviously, like, appealing to the eye, you know? So thinking about that. But also it's been really hard because I'll be looking through photos and there's some that just look really pretty, but, like, just because they look nice doesn't necessarily mean that I want to put them in, you know, in my, like, you know, book from this. So it's finding the balance of, you know, kind of being authentic to, like, who I am, versus, like, also that battle of just, like, pleasing kind of, like, others to the point where it's like, because, like, there might be, like, you might have in your head, like a preconceived notion of what hiking the Appalachian Trail is like. Like, you might, like, if you go on Instagram and look at and type in the hashtag Appalachian Trail, like, majority of the photos are going to be, like, sunsets and just, like, pretty pictures of vistas, and that's not necessarily what the AT is all about. So when I'm going through photos, I try to also think about, like, what photos don't get shown on Instagram, or, you know, trying to show, like, the whole experience versus just the, you know, hiker fantasy that you might see on Instagram is a challenge.
Yeah. So do you have like, a specific number of copies that you're planning on making?
Right now I'm, like, quoted for 250.
Okay.
So yeah, unfortunately you have to print a lot to make it semi-affordable. So I'm gonna go for it. And honestly, I'm kind of terrified because I don't know if it's going to be considered good or not, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a collection of my photos from my trip. So it's something, like, I struggle, like, when I was taking photos on the trail, and, you know, I was struggling with, like, okay, like, how am I going to put these together? And, like, does that mean a book? Does that just mean, like a blog post every so often, or, like, Instagram post? And, like, I ultimately decided that, like, you know, if someone wants to, like, truly sit down and see an AT experience, especially, like, photographically, like, a book was, like, the only way I could think of to do it. I mean, like, Instagram is cool, social media is great, but at the end of the day, like sitting at a hostel and, like, flipping, like, there's a lot of, like, self-published books on the trail, and, like, just sitting there, like, sitting at a hostel and, like, looking through someone else who has also put together, like, a photography book. Or there's a really cool book that I saw at a hostel in Maine where someone, like, wrote, like, a poem at different mile markers. Like, they probably just wrote, like, a haiku or something at whenever it came to them, but they, like, had, like, the mile markers, and it was just, like, a really cool, like, way to see the trail. So I think that you know, hopefully when someone picks up my book, they just kind of are able to experience the trail from my perspective, at least, and maybe hopefully that'll inspire them to either, like, go out and hike locally, or maybe want to do the AT. So I just I do think you kind of need to have, like, that physical copy or that collection of photos to really do the whole journey justice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Are you going to sell them? I'd love to buy one.
Heck yeah. You know it.
Well, let me know when you get them done, and I will definitely be purchasing one.
For sure. Yeah, no, I'm in kind of a rut right now because like just with everything that's going on in the world, just like existing has been so hard, and like staying focused right now on like creative work has just it's taken a back burner. There's really no other way to describe it, but like I can't bring myself to like do anything really creative other than, you know, like I said, like going for a walk and taking photos and stuff. It's just anything more than that has been a lot hard. How have you been doing with everything?
I've been doing pretty good. I've also been getting involved in some projects, which
Okay.
is what led me to. So my husband, he's an avid hiker, and he's talked
Mm-hmm.
about wanting to do a hike through the Sheltowee for a long time since it goes right through the heart of Moorhead, and I mean it starts just right
Mm-hmm.
up in here and goes down quite a bit. He'd always wanted to do it, and I was always kind of reluctant, just because I hadn't done a lot of hiking really. But I started this project about being in association with geography
Okay.
and with
Okay.
place, and thinking about how I feel within the Appalachian landscape, and thinking about like how I feel mentally and how that could
Mm-hmm.
express itself in a physical, visual way.
Yeah.
So I've been taking these. I call they're self portraits, but they're not really self portraits because I don't really look at them as myself. It's more like representations
Okay.
of a feeling or of an idea about a feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But and
Yeah.
then I've been turning them into salted paper prints.
Oh yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
So that's so I started that, and then it got me really thinking. A project that is so deeply rooted in Appalachian geography, I think it would be more than fitting to challenge myself to do this hike through, especially since I've also got somebody who would be willing to do it with me.
Mm-hmm.
And having that experience to take that time and reflect and think and make portraiture like that on the field or on the trail, but
Mm-hmm.
also be able to do kind of I guess general photography of people I meet and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
so that's what I've been thinking about and doing overall.
That sounds really cool. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I really want to do it. That's another reason why I wanted to sit down and talk with you and see, kind of get your perspective on it, because yours is
Hmm.
much more of a commitment than the Sheltowee. It's, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks, not eight
And
months.
it's still a lot though. That's still a lot, you
Hmm.
know? So,
Yeah.
but
No,
it's a good starting point. You know, I mean, like, that's great. Like, that's a huge, like, I mean, like, even with a, a trip of 2 to 3 weeks, you'd still want to, like, you know, go out and, like, kind of practice before you go. Like, that's still going to require, like, quite a bit of planning. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you know, if you can do, like, 2 to 3 weeks, you could do a through hike of any, you know, length, really, with enough planning. So, but that idea sounds really cool. I'm not too familiar with the trail itself, but so it's probably like 200-300 miles.
yeah, I think it's like
Okay.
313 or something like that.
And it goes like right through
Yep, it goes.
Kentucky, or
Yeah, it goes all the way through Kentucky and then down to Tennessee. Down
okay,
into Tennessee.
that sounds beautiful. I want to look at this. I'm gonna look at this trail now.
Yeah, and it goes
Um,
through a couple trail towns. And we have friends close by, so if we needed anything dropped off or something, that would totally be manageable. But
mhm.
it's in the very early planning stages, but I do hope it comes to flourish.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it could be a good transitional thing for you too, especially, you know, depending on what happens, or who knows.
Yeah. So
But
another thing
I
I
mean,
wanted.
I
Oh,
can't.
sorry.
What was that?
I had another question, but you can go on.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, like, if you, I mean, like, I can't speak enough to, like, you know, taking that time to, like, slow down and reflect, you know, and I mean, obviously you can take photos and do stuff, but, you know, if you can do a hike like that, you know, you should.
So the next question was, I mean, were there feelings of isolation for you? I assume there would be while on the trail.
Yes, not like different feelings of isolation because like I mean there was always like hikers around and people around because the Appalachian Trail is very much so like a social trail. Um, but I definitely like felt isolated, obviously, like from the life that I left behind, like my family and friends that were just like going about their normal life, and I felt very isolated from like the life I had known. So in a way, I did kind of feel like isolated, just like from like who I am and myself. But in the literal sense, I was not like isolated from people as much, just because there were always hikers around. But I think like if you were to look at it, you know, as someone who's like maybe someone who's like not familiar with hiking at all, like if someone were to like see what it was like through hiking, like you're always around people, but you're still in the middle of the woods. So like in a way, you're still kind of isolated, like from the rest of society. But there were like, I mean, I would hike alone quite a bit, but like I never felt like true isolation, I guess you could say. Like I feel like there's probably a deeper feeling of isolation than what I felt, because I mean I can only imagine what it would feel like for someone to go off in the middle of the woods like with no one for miles and miles, like you know, like in Alaska or somewhere out west where there's just like no one or nothing. Like I feel like that feeling of isolation is probably feels a lot different than like the social isolation that I was feeling out on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Is there any connection for you within that feeling and or like a possible feeling of isolation within the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I do crave isolation, which is like probably why I was drawn to like walking through the woods for several months. I do feel like being alone and isolated is like I kind of like one of my happy places. So that's always been, you know, I think that's what like draws me to like the outdoors is the ability to like go isolate yourself and reflect internally. That's kind of what got me in. I mean, that's probably like when you get down to it is like why I like hiking so much and how I got into it, just because it was a way to like remove myself from whatever was going on and just hike or walk or whatever.
All right. Well, is there anything that you'd like to say or add that I haven't asked you about?
I'm sure there's a lot of stupid stuff that I could say, but I mean, is there anything that like is interesting to you that like I was talking about that like didn't that you maybe think I could talk more about? Or
no, I mean I think that everything you said was great and is eye-opening for me too to think about, especially again both being photographers and kind of having an interest in nature and photography, thinking about that and inspiration generally. So going back to inspiration, do you draw a lot of inspiration from that experience in other aspects of your life that are creative that don't necessarily have to be photography?
I mean, I do feel very much like just like inspired to like slow down. So that, and like that could be like anything, like choosing to ride my bike instead of driving, just like also has given me a new appreciation for like things I can do in my daily life. And I don't know, like slowing down so much to like walk across the country, like you're slow, like you're as slow as you can go. Like you're not driving a car, you're not riding a bike, like you are just walking. So I think that I really took away like just appreciating a simple life and just like slowing down a little bit, not needing to rush things that don't need to be rushed. But I do think it was interesting talking about just like another thing about inspiration is like as a photographer I feel like photography and like nature and hiking, it's all like so connected, because like, especially when you're like talking photography and like photojournalism, it's just like human nature. And then when you're out hiking, it's like just like mother nature, and like those two things I feel like are very similar, and like just as catching, like, you know, a beautiful moment witnessed between people, and then, you know, witnessing something out in the middle of the woods, they're equally as exciting. And like, I would be out, you know, hiking and taking photos and like see something really cool and just like freak out like in the middle, like by myself, because like I couldn't believe I was witnessing something so cool, you know, natural. But it's definitely inspiring to be out there. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love the idea of that connection, of that comparison between human nature and Mother Nature. I think that's really fascinating. I like that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, my phone is about to die, so I just...
That's okay. Well, is there a particular place where if people want to look at your work would be best? I was going to link your Instagram down in the description box and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would honestly just link my Instagram, because everything else is so... Once I have my book, I will update my website, but Instagram is the most, like, reliable tool for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone else you get to talk to.